So welcome to the session today, Empowering Neurodivergent Students. And we're going to look at kind of 10 key areas to help that. But first off, who am I or we? My name's Matthew Timmis, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Aim Forward. I've got probably 20 years experience in the kind of neurodiversity and disability sectors, experience working both with individuals and teams across workplaces and educational settings. And my passion is enabling people to perform to their best. Aim Forward are a industry leading provider of both diagnostic assessments, needs assessments and coaching, trying to create really personalised strategies to learn and work your way. The session today is very much focused on kind of neurodivergence and neurodivergent conditions, but also we will look into kind of mental health, and there's a lot of overlap into examination support for physical, medical, and then hearing and visual impairments as well. So when we talk about neurodivergence, we're really looking at the areas on the left-hand side of the page in terms of dyslexia, specific learning difficulties, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD and autism, and then also mental health such as anxiety and depression are key areas in this session today. And this is where we kind of, or I have spent most of my career in terms of supporting individuals from a whole variety of educational institutions, from the top of Scotland through to the south coast of England. We've supported thousands of students to kind of learn and work their way and perform to their full potential. And hopefully that's what this session is going to kind of look at, breaking down, particularly from an examination perspective, some of those kind of areas to be thinking about, and then practical tools to kind of do that. So the agenda today is to kind of break down those kind of key areas, starting with awareness and like knowledge, understanding, through to two core areas of reading and writing, time management, moving through to learning environment, health and well-being, assistive technology, so starting to get more into the kind of more practical elements, and then also assessments and support, so external support and support within schools and colleges themselves. Just before I get onto this slide, just useful for me to understand a little bit in terms of background of potential diagnosis. So if anyone wanted to fill in the poll, should be completely anonymous, and just gives me a little bit of flavour of the parents and carers who are here today. So in terms of awareness, knowledge and understanding is key, but being able to understand and listen to your child is so key in terms of understanding their view of the world. So every diagnosis for every single individual is completely unique. So no two forms of autism can be the same, because it is unique to that individual. There will be certain traits that are common throughout a diagnosis, for example, ADHD or autism, but for that individual, only they will really truly know and understand how they view the world and see the world, and therefore what potential kind of strategies and support can be best put in place. And you as the parent or carer will know them best, but there's always more to kind of learn and be able to ask and inquire about in a really kind of hopefully open setting. It's easier said than done. It's super easy as a parent. I literally have done this myself. in terms of not asking some of those questions and making some of those assumptions. It's so easy to do, but this is just a kind of, just that kind of reminder or that nudge in terms of being able to ask those really open questions, and also be able to kind of research a little bit from your side as well. Not top line research, but also not taking in books and books and books and not knowing where to start, and there's so many ideas. So I think it's really useful to kind of start from a research perspective, finding certain podcasts that you relate to, or finding a few key or core books that could be recommended. On our newsletter we have like book of the month, and that might be like condition specific, and that's super helpful to be able to then learn a little bit more about the potential diagnosis or condition, so that you can then maybe start to frame some of those questions that you might be asking your child or teen. And in asking those questions, offering that opportunity to listen as well, having that that dialogue, that understanding, so that if you're getting yes, no answers, which is super common, being able to kind of open those questions out a little bit, or dig a little bit deeper, so to turn those yes, no's into a little bit more depth. And that might require the right question, or it might require the right setting. So if it's a routine after dinner, for example, we'll spend a little bit of time really relaxed questions, or it could be going for a walk and asking certain questions. Those sorts of questions about how do you study best are probably not done or not best asked in the middle of a revision period, or 2 weeks before an exam where stresses might be higher or anxiety might be higher. And so being able to kind of openly ask those questions in a real safe setting is super important. Patience is also really key. You might be asking those questions, or you might be setting certain strategies into action, and those strategies might not be being taken up, or they might not be being implemented, and it can be easy to mistake that for laziness or lack of motivation, and it's easy to get frustrated to say, look, we've set this in place and you agreed this, and we should be being able to kind of see this progress. It can be really daunting to put new strategies in place, or be able to find the right hook, or the right way forward. And so having that patience at the beginning, having that underlying kind of patience, is again can be easier said than done, but super important. And then kind of like looking holistically, so looking at the big picture as well, and what little changes across that big picture can we make? What little 1% wins, little 5% wins that don't seem hugely daunting, but also things that might be really easy to implement, that are just like easy wins that everyone can kind of agree on. Having said that, on the small easy wins, in some of these conversations, in these more relaxed settings, sometimes you can get real light bulb moments that's like, oh, I never thought about doing this, or I've never thought about I'm doing this because of these reasons. And obviously trying to harness those light bulb moments is super important. And then also looking after yourself. Job as the parent is super stressful, super confusing. Like, which ways do I go? How do I help my child the best? How do I support them the most? Am I doing the right things? Am I doing the wrong things? Being able to look after your well-being is crucial, particularly during times of additional stress to your child or teen. So as things are coming up to exam periods, if your work is super stressful, it's just having that awareness and that kind of taking a step back to say, yeah, I'm going to be stressed at this point. I need to be able to calmly support my child. Again, much easier said than done, but just having that awareness and knowing that in these crucial bits, it's important to look after yourself as well. So just just to go back into the awareness area, I do think it's so important to look at this as like the foundation part of this presentation, in terms of being able to, if the bigger the awareness, understanding, empathy, the more efficient and effective strategies can be put in place further down the line. So having this understanding as that kind of foundational base level is super important. Also super important is the next two key areas. So reading and writing make up most exams, with challenges in the reading process and challenges in the writing process. The student is going to not necessarily be able to perform to their full potential. So obviously reading is fundamental to kind of academic success. Two or three of the kind of key areas that we'll see as difficulties in the reading process for individuals with a neurodivergent condition, so specific learning difficulties, ADHD and autism, might be working memory, processing speed, or executive function or executive functions. And I'll just touch on what they mean and why they then impact shortly. But also from a mental health perspective, from a physical health perspective, anything that is impacting on concentration, focus, are also going to impact working memory. So an individual with a mental health condition might not have a weak working memory, but if that individual is having intrusive thoughts, is excessively tired from anxiety or difficulties with sleep, then their working memory is, as a result, impacted. So it's not necessarily weak working memory, but actually being able to retain and process information, which is the core part of the reading process, could be impacted. And so it is relevant across most conditions. So what is working memory, and what is processing speed, and what is executive function? Really briefly and really crudely, this is not the kind of scientific model. It doesn't look like this in the real world, or what is happening in your brain, but I think it's a really nice analogy, is that you can think of working memory almost like a kind of golf ball sized sphere in the brain. It's not quite like this from a technical perspective, but if you imagine a kind of space where information is held in the brain, so you view text or you hear spoken word and you store it in the working memory, then you'll have a processing chip. As those words are stored in that sphere, the processing chip will identify what those words are, or that actually it's an image really that we're seeing, not the individual letters. It'll process that information, and then just outside this sphere is what I like to think of as the executive function. Is like a bouncer, allowing the relevant information in and not allowing irrelevant information in. So for the working memory, if you're reading through a line of text and there's, say, 10 words, you have a weak working memory. So, for example, a student with dyslexia might have a weak working memory. As the information comes in, which might be a word, it could pass straight through that working memory, and therefore the processing chip doesn't spot it or identify it. Therefore, you might skip words, have to reread sentences. And it's almost like those words could be covered in like a little bit of fairy liquid, so they slip straight through. Working memory can't grab them. Processing chip can't identify it. Or, for example, with regards to ADHD, if you have a weak executive function, you're not able to stop the distractions that might be next to you. So if you're sat in an academic setting and someone's fiddling with their pen next to you and your teacher is speaking, all you can concentrate on is the pen, because your executive function is not able to stop that sound entering your working memory. Instead of listening to the academic or the teacher, the focus is on the pen. And therefore, it's if you're trying to read or process text or listen to someone, then that's obviously going to really impact the ability to do that. Having had a diagnostic assessment, you might be able to see these scoring. So, for example, particularly with SPLDs or ADHD, you might have that cognitive profile with autism as well, less so with mental health conditions. But what can you do in terms of, so if there is weaknesses with working memory or processing speed, what can you do in order to help your child or teen through that process? So going back to the first slide, certainly asking them. So if you have a diagnostic report, that should be able to tell you what that profile looks like. And actually, I'll just start another poll in terms of individuals who've had a diagnosis, whether that's autism or ADHD or specific learning difficulties. If you've had a diagnosis, you might have that already. If not, what can you do? So asking those questions, what do you find hard? Simple questions such as, do you skip words? Do you skip lines? Do you experience blurry text? Are you finding it difficult to concentrate? Do you read a few lines and then drift off? Can you read a page and then have to go back over it? Maybe have some text in front of your child to be able to see how they're actually reading. And they might not realize that they're experiencing those difficulties. So they might sit next to a peer and think, why are they reading this page so much faster than me? So it might not be that they're realizing that as well. So it can be really affirming, but ensure that you talk about like positives and strengths there as well, rather than kind of lots of questions around difficulties. What strategies can we put in place for difficulties with regards to reading? Using text-to-speech software, and we'll come on to that in more detail later, can really help. So that's where there's text, either digital text or written text that's being imported in. Digital text that's then read aloud by computer, phone, app. And that means that the working memory is able to see and hear the dual input, so they can see the word and they can hear the word at the same time. And that really helps a weakness with working memory. So instead of words skipping straight through, they're much more likely to be held onto and processed. So it'll speed up the reading process, but also make it much more accurate as well. Being able to use audiobooks can help reduce strain, especially during revision periods. And then also breaking reading into smaller, more manageable sections, and also encouraging like visual aids like mind maps to plan out their reading. So they've got loads of revision to conduct. Actually having one little spider diagram that maps out all of the different areas that they're going to need to read can really help as well. Thank you so much as well for conducting the poll. So so yeah, super useful to see that with quite a mix in terms of individuals on the session today. So quite a number of specific learning difficulties. ADHD is high, and autism is high as well, and then mental health conditions as well. So that's really interesting to see. Reading and then into writing. So again, another core area in examinations, and the things that we talked about with regards to working memory and processing speeds happen in the opposite way with writing. So your thinking and thoughts are then having to be implemented into the working memory and then put out onto the page, either by keyboard, by pen, or by speech. And transferring your ideas to the page is really quite a complex cognitive process. So you're having to think about the thoughts, you're having to then move your hand across a keyboard or across a page, you're having to think how things are spelt, you have to think about the order of it, what's coming next. It is a really complex process. And so if you do have a weak working memory, processing speed, executive function, if from a mental health perspective, again, from a concentration, focus, intrusive thoughts, it can be really difficult to kind of get that flowing writing process. The difficulties with structuring work, so in order and unordering information can be incredibly difficult for a variety of reasons. Being able to structure assignments or revision tools is really difficult. But also things like spelling, grammar. If you're having to think about what you're going to write, but then you see suddenly a red underline and you're thinking, what's that, how's that spelt? What should I be putting down there? It can then really interrupt your flow and your thought process, and being able to then actually get all your ideas into the page, it completely disrupts that, and you have to kind of almost start again. So being able to have things like much more comprehensive spell checkers, automatic spell checkers as well, that just change words, and I'll come on to those later, rather than that kind of word typical kind of red underline, isn't particularly helpful for someone who's making quite a lot of errors. Things like open-ended exam questions or assignment questions for an autistic student. Having a really open-ended question can be extremely challenging, often overwhelming, not knowing what am I supposed to be doing in terms of the kind of key task, and being able to break that down into kind of the kind of core components of it. So being able to spend time kind of looking at those different areas and asking your child like how they experience writing, what do they find hard? Could it be starting with some work? Is there a lot of procrastination? Is there a lot of worry about getting it wrong? That kind of fear of the blank page. Is it to do with structuring work? Is it to do with spelling? Asking specific questions, or what feedback they're getting from their teachers as well. So being able to get that feedback from the tutors, whether that be a parents' evening or being able to kind of access that throughout the year as well. So going back onto potential strategies, assistive technology such as speech-to-text software can be an absolute game changer with regard to the writing process. Being able to verbalize your ideas is so much easier than being able to type or write from a cognitive perspective, and therefore you're going to speed up the writing process, you're going to speed up the accuracy. And all of these different strategies are about those kind of small-ish wins. So if you can be 5% faster, 10% faster in one essay, it's not huge, but across a year, an academic year, it's massive. And so as you start to put those strategies into place earlier, then they can be ready for the exam times as well. Using mind mapping tools to organize your ideas, so being able to map out your assignments and being able to map out your revision processes, then you can revise those maps and know that when you then hit exam time, you're able to break that down much more easily, and then you can start the writing process much more efficiently. You can also encourage free writing to help reduce perfectionism and allow thoughts to flow without pressure. That's also where some of the speech-to-text software comes into play as well, because you can just brainstorm and kind of think of your ideas really quickly, and then you can use the keyboard to kind of refine them. Moving on to time management and organization. So we have covered the kind of two key areas of reading and research, but one of the kind of key difficulties that we often see is in terms of then actually implementing a revision plan or knowing how much time to allocate to certain tasks. It's, I would say, a challenge for every team or every student. So it's certainly an important area to explore if there's going to be specific difficulties and challenges as a result of your diagnosis, as in it could make it much more harder than your peers to kind of prioritize and then complete on tasks. And again, across the board in terms of different diagnoses, from mental health to autism or ADHD, starting planning and kind of and motivation in between as well. It's important to remember the individual nature of all students, in that time management might be also a huge strength area. So whilst it could be a specific difficulty, it could be a specific strength, and being able to kind of harness that and build on that is always really valuable. But if it is a difficulty, then leaning into what strategies they prefer is always helpful. Trying to really push to get someone to start super early if their natural inclination is last minute is really difficult, and so it's about finding that balance of where that happy medium is. So commonly, so from an ADHD perspective, motivation or procrastination in particular can be really challenging. Like, where do I start? How do I start? I'm worried that I'm going to not do as well as I might do, or I don't know where to. That kind of fear of failure. I don't know how much time to allocate to this specific task is really common. Not being aware of like that time. How long did it take last time? Okay, it's going to take about that next time. Is quite often something that doesn't happen with regards to certain traits with regards to ADHD or autism. Being able to analyze that, what happened last time. You might see it with regards to getting ready in the morning. It's like something that happens every day, but it's really difficult to kind of actually find that regular process. Sorry, Sal. I've just got a question come through, or a raised hand. If you want to pop the any questions in the Q&A, I'll definitely have a look at this. And yeah, the presentation will be shared later on, along with the recording as well. So we'll be able to send that out to everyone. And as I say, if there's any questions that are kind of more specific that aren't general for everyone, I'll definitely be able to get back to anyone who sends in a question. The questions are anonymous to everyone else, but I can see who sent the question in. And then just to finish off on, in terms of time management, using like visual timers, like really old school time management techniques can be super useful. Having physical calendars, having something on the wall, whiteboards on the wall, so you can see it all the time. It's really easy to have organizational calendars that are in an app that get shut down, and then it's kind of forgotten, and they're away. Being able to see it all the time can be really helpful. Apps like Google Calendars or Tasks can help break down tasks. And then tools or strategies like the Pomodoro technique can embed specific strategies, along with like AT software, so assistive technology software, can help maintain focus and encourage like planning out of tasks into much more manageable steps. So actual kind of exams and revision, which is kind of core part of what we're talking about today. Obviously exams can be a huge source of anxiety, but the right strategies can reduce stress and improve performance. I think it's really important to think about that kind of the levels of anxiety and the levels of worry and stress in the build up to examinations. A lot of students that we work with will commonly talk about the impact of either mental health condition or neurodivergence. The overwhelm during that process can really impact their ability to perform to their full potential, and anything that can be done to try and kind of reduce that, again, easier said than done. It's quite a complex area, but being able to kind of focus in on that rather than just actually about their knowledge and understanding about the subjects, being able to kind of enter the exam in that. most effective state possible is super important. Spreading out revision and like mixing up topics can be super helpful. So short, frequent revision sessions with a mix of topics will help students retain information better than cramming. Supporting your child to embed this practice will be hard, but really helpful. And again, going back to that very first point about patience, some of these sorts of strategies that have not been implemented before, or might be more challenging to implement, then it is about that patience, about not getting frustrated that they aren't, like, you're trying to do everything you can. It's about having that understanding that actually this is going to be really difficult. Encouraging active and like multi-sensory learning, so self-testing, summarizing material, and teaching others can really help solidify knowledge. Explore which strategies work best for your child, whether it's like flashcards, mind maps, or discussing topics like out loud. Discuss their preferred learning styles as well, like are they a kinesthetic or like auditory or a visual learner? Can they kind of explain subjects to a sibling, for example, can be really helpful. And then during examinations, if there's adjustments in place, so if your child has access to like a reader or a scribe, ensure that they've trialed this prior to the formal exam, trying to work on that kind of understanding and familiarity, so you're not walking into an examination thinking, who is the scribe? I've never used one before. What is going to happen? How is this support going to be implemented? How do I use this? Making sure that it's been tried before it is really important. And before mocks as well, it's about having that as a kind of that process already in place. Also during the examinations, going like looking at kind of more holistic areas is things like mindfulness and other relaxation techniques in the build up to those examinations, particularly when anxiety is present. Being able to clear days around examinations, so there's like no limited distractions. Think about small adjustments that could help on the day, so a lift to school rather than public transport. Neurodivergent students can often worry far more than just the content of the exam. Will I get there on time? What if I arrive at the wrong room, etc.? So putting those kind of things in place can be really useful. And then in the exam process, celebrating that progress, like celebrating what they're learning and not just the kind of end result. So encouraging your team to focus on like progress rather than perfection, and that can help alleviate anxiety, but also build confidence. Some questions that could be helpful to ask, like in that period, could be, I don't want to get, it's, you'll know what's best for your child 100%, but some of the questions that we might ask, for example, could be, when and where do you study best? What do you already know about your subject? What else do you need to know? What will be covered in your exams? What revision techniques work best for you? Have you made a realistic revision timetable? How can I help to support you? What works well as a reward for you? Those sorts of open questions can really help kind of devise that kind of exam support and kind of revision process at home. So leading on from at home, next up is the learning environment, which can sometimes get overlooked. Being able to have a kind of learning environment that's really set up for them is, again, easier said than done. But if it is possible, it can make a huge difference. So having a clean desk, clean mind can be helpful for some, but others might prefer a really messy desk, and that's also fine. And so I think it's important to kind of pick your battles in that kind of area, but enabling it to be their space. Ergonomics matter, so it's not just for people my age with posture and kind of ergonomic setup that's important in terms of later life back care, for example. The right ergonomic setup can increase concentration, it can increase focus. Again, 1%, 5%, doesn't matter. But if you're hunched over a laptop, energy levels and concentration levels are going to be different than if you're sat in an ergonomic position with a large monitor, maybe a separate screen, like 2 screens next to each other, and a much more efficient way of working. So that can be something to definitely be looking at. Things like separate keyboards, mice, being able to sit in that kind of most effective position. And also to think about sensory environment as well, about lighting, about heat, about texture, be able to work with your child to look at what works best. And then in the slides, I've just included like the DSE checklist. It's a real boring government process, but actually it's relevant everywhere from workplaces to home office setup. So might be useful to look at. In terms of health and well-being, again, not necessarily something that's like an exam strategy, as it were, but just thinking about that overall kind of healthy balance between work and well-being is essential for academic success. It might take a neurodivergent teen or student longer to complete a certain task, and therefore it's really important, even more important, to be able to ensure that relaxation time or downtime is also scheduled in. They're able to meet with friends or be able to like do their hobbies. Increasing productivity isn't just about increasing grades. It's also about allowing more time to meet with friends, etc. Some key areas, certainly sleep, nutrition, exercise. Again, easier said than done from a parenting, carer perspective, but being able to have those conversations are really helpful. Around exam time, mindfulness strategies like we've talked about, or could be deep breathing or meditation sessions even. Headspace and Calm are both really good apps to help with that area. And then going back to that celebrating growth, don't just focus on the end result. It's the journey of learning and highlighting that. So moving into kind of more practical strategies for both examinations and then revision and researching the lead up to those exams. Some common assistive software that we commonly work with that can work really well are things like text-to-speech software that we've mentioned. So digital text to spoken word, and the opposite way, the spoken word to digital text. And for example, text help Clara read text to speech, Dragon is speech to text, but also you can get inbuilt software now. So both Mac and Windows, and then into apps in Google as well, all have these inbuilt features that are free, not quite as good as the paid for software, but really efficient and effective as well. Then you've got things like mind mapping software to be able to map out and plan your assignments. Some of the more complex pieces of software like MindView, you can actually put your plan in and then it'll convert it into a Word document for you. So it's not just a kind of static plan, it turns into your revision Word document and what you're doing there. That reminds me in terms of, I'll just set another poll just in terms of like whether you think that your child or teen either has used AT before, is ready to use it. It's always, again, really helpful for us to know, because depending on age and their experience and kind of what they've used before. So that's mind mapping software. Then into spelling and grammar software. So you've got Global, Autocorrect, Grammarly, Ginger you've probably heard of. They're like automatic spell checkers or grammar checkers. So instead of having that red underline, can be really distracting. You're actually automatically correcting the spelling, and it's much more accurate than kind of standard word spell checkers. And then other software, things like Glean or Brain in Hand, can be super helpful in terms of either note taking or kind of reducing anxiety and worry around exam times. Moving on to like assessments and like outside, like external support. So we'll come next into like schools and support in schools, but this is like outside of like support outside of school. So diagnostic assessments. I think that like a lot of people are familiar with what is a diagnostic assessment. Now there's a lot of understanding and knowledge, more so than there certainly was probably 10 years ago. And that having a diagnostic assessment can be super helpful in terms of unlocking reasonable adjustments, validation, understanding cognitive profiles, understanding the kind of experiences and kind of areas of that kind of cognition. So whether it be working memory or processing speeds. Needs assessments are something that people possibly know a little bit less about. So it's like diagnostic is kind of the yes, no of that diagnosis, and then the needs assessment really is the like what next. So okay, I have this diagnosis, but what do I do in terms of from a strategy perspective, or like what's next in that journey? So a needs assessment can unlock what the most effective strategies might be in relation to that that diagnosis for that individual. And it's always kind of bespoke strategies, breaking down things that we've talked about today. And then finally, so like study skills tuition. So study skills is slightly different than like each standard tuition. So you might have like a math tutor or a history tutor, but study skills is more condition specific. So you might have an expert in dyslexia or an expert in autism who's looking at more academic skills broadly. So how are you writing? How are you composing your work? And that can be really helpful to kind of embed those strategies across the kind of academic areas. But I'll touch a little bit more again onto needs assessments in terms of that awareness is probably not as much as the diagnostic area, but what a needs assessment does is break down some of the things that we've talked about today. So it'll break down that individual's, and it's a one-to-one assessment with child and parent, usually teen and parent, or carer, and it will look at their diagnosis or potential diagnosis and break that down into what does that mean. So it allows an expert to actually interpret that, and then it looks at their academic workloads in terms of reading, research, note-taking, time management. It will look at their environment, and then what the best strategies are, including reasonable adjustments. There might be recommendations that could help. It's always the school's responsibility to decipher what is reasonable and what will be implemented, but it is kind of looked at and kind of taken into account in that needs assessment process. And then also wrapped into that, like the wellbeing elements as well, because that's kind of foundational to kind of academic success. So that's external support, but then also core to a lot of this is actually the support in school, college. So the SEND teams and the SENCOs that we work with are so helpful and so knowledgeable, and absolutely someone that you need to be engaging with. We do get feedback from parents that it can be really challenging to get the right support in place, or that there might be loads of hoops to be jumping through, or that sort of support implementation process can be really difficult to go through. Our kind of experience sort of sitting in between that is that everyone tends to be working in the same direction. Like the support teams are there always to do their best for your child and their students. And so if there are any difficulties in getting that support embedded, it's just about keeping that communication and dialogue open. But it can be challenging at times. The resources that are available to schools has not made that process straightforward. can sometimes be where external support can help in those kind of additional needs. But just knowing that the knowledge and experience and expertise is always there in that school. And in terms of being able to, if you haven't engaged yet with your Senkos or SEN teams, then being able to kind of get those kind of ILPs or individual learning plans in place. An individual learning plan is a little bit like a needs assessment, but just much more from an internal academic perspective. And they'll probably look at kind of key areas like assess, plan, do, review, and that'll make part of the ILP. But it's really important to note that last one, reviewing it. So if there is a plan in place, is it relevant in the next 6 months? Is it relevant in a year? Being able to touch back into place if this is working, but actually this isn't working, and being able to make that kind of regular process. And in between the school support, the external support, the research and reading that you'll be doing, it is a minefield for parents in terms of what is the right option for me, what is too much, what is not enough. But being able to work with the school is the right way forward. Can feel like an uphill struggle to get the right support in place sometimes, but being able to kind of work that through that process with open communication, we normally see the kind of right results at the end of it. So feels like I've been whizzing through lots of massive areas really quickly with maybe not enough depth to all of them. I could speak about every single number on that page for at least a day each. So apologies for the kind of whiz through. I'm sure there's loads of questions on each section, and as I say, I will get back to people on that. But hopefully this gives you a flavour of, certainly from our side, what things to be thinking about in terms of that process to move towards how do I best help my child, my teen in examinations and in that build up to it, and what are the steps in that I can be looking at. What I would say to kind of conclude is that you're all doing an incredible job. Obviously, just being here shows how much you want to help. It can feel super daunting. You will worry, are you doing the right things? Are we doing the wrong things? There's so many options, but every parent that we work with has that feeling to some degree. So you're definitely not alone in that thinking. Just remember that supporting your child isn't always about big dramatic changes, as a little slightly cheesy Confucius quote here, but I think it's super relevant in this kind of context, is that the person who moves a mountain begins with carrying away small stones. Start with those small adjustments. Perhaps look at the learning environment, or is there a piece of inbuilt assistive software that just sounds like, actually, that could be really useful. And just open it, start playing with it, and see what happens, and then start to build from there. That kind of complex plan that we've talked through there it seems like a lot, but as I say, if you go through each step, it will start to build up. And so, yeah, I hope that this webinar has given you practical ideas to work together with your child. Supporting a neurodivergent teen through their academic journey requires patience, empathy, and the right strategies. By understanding their unique needs and fostering supportive environments and utilising tools like assistive technology, you can help support and ultimately help them reach their kind of full potential. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today. If you've got any additional questions, I'm going to sit on here for the next little while. Anyone who obviously needs to jump off, thank you so much for attending. I'll leave my details up on here, or essentially the support team's details as well. But yeah, I'll just run through some of the questions that have been asked and share those with you. But if there's anything more that I can do outside of this session, just get in touch tomorrow, and we'll be more than happy to help. So thank you for thank you very much for some of those claps. It's always lovely to see, and thank you for your time. In terms of some of the questions that we've got. How do we support an anxious student who likes to be highly organised with long-term revision, struggling with many tests at school, disrupting her plans and how she feels? She needs to organise her own revision and explaining to school and supporting her together. Being able to work with an individual really anxious student who likes to organise their own time but is struggling to fit in with maybe school's methods or processes, being able to get that into writing, I think, really helps. So breaking that down into, we work quite a lot with mind mapping software, and so being able to break down exam, time management, organisation maps. You can then share that with the school to say, this is what we're going to do, and that can be a really helpful comeback. So that so long as both parties can see what they're doing, I think that can be really helpful. If you're going down a path of I'm organising my time this way and the school is recommending a different way, it's much more challenging. Whereas having that actually written out in a slightly more, doesn't have to be formal way, but sharing that student's mind map or little spider diagram of where they're spending their time and how they're organising their revision can be really helpful. Consistency across subjects. Yeah, this is a really interesting point in terms of being able to get consistent effort on all subjects. So might try really hard at ones that they love, or not so much effort in ones that they don't. I think that being able to ask questions about the barriers in the ones that they are less passionate about, and being able to look at, so why is that happening? Is it an interest? Is it a performance? What is the reason behind that lack of motivation there? If it is to do with a lack of interest in it, can you gamify that revision? So gamifying, I can send out links to this, but gamifying is a newish concept in terms of being able to look at revision around a kind of gaming process in terms of being able to win at that subject rather than kind of enjoying the revision because you're wanting to learn more about it. It's about getting points in that process. So I would probably say that if it's a kind of lack of interest, gamifying something. If it's a lack of knowledge, understanding, or kind of performance issue, it's about then maybe is there some external support that could be put in place. Is the ILP or individual learning plan as well as an EHCP review? So they're two different things. So the EHCP is much more comprehensive. It could be delivered externally to the school. The ILP would be definitely delivered internally, and an individual learning plan sometimes doesn't have to have a specific diagnosis, like a formal diagnosis in place. It just depends on the school, but they're slightly different. I would say the ILP is a smaller, the AHCP is much more comprehensive. So yeah, someone said that one of their Senkos said they don't have enough staff to deliver an ILP. If you have a formal diagnosis, you should have access to an individual learning plan. If you did need access to external needs assessment, for example, and that's another question as well, is where would we find someone to do a needs assessment? Aim Forward, that's one of our kind of key services really, is delivering needs assessments, and so you'll be able to find information on that on our website. There are other providers available, but yeah, I would, if you have a formal diagnosis and the school says there's no resource for an individual learning plan, then I would be escalating that kind of conversation, because that should be something that should be put in place. There's a question around dyscalculia in relation to, it's not something that I've specifically talked about, but just to highlight, it's an area that is, we're seeing quite a shortage of dyscalculia diagnosticians in the country, and so in terms of exploring that, there's a lot of difficulty at the moment with regards to maths anxiety, confusing the dyscalculia diagnostic process. So just something to be aware of. But if you want any, we've got loads of information and really good blogs on dyscalculia on our website. So there's a lot of really useful information there. How can I tackle my child's fear of failure and giving up revision as a result? I don't know the diagnosis of the said child, but one thing that I would talk about with regards to ADHD is something that people don't necessarily, it's not one of the more obvious traits, and harder to see in children than adults, but criticism sensitivity and rejection dysmorphia, what, RSD, rejection syndrome dysmorphia, criticism sensitivity, sorry, it's 9 o'clock and my brain's gone. Rejection sensitivity is a real key component of a lot of ADHD traits, and that can come out as fear of failure. And so that's where some of the procrastination can occur, but also feedback from how the work has been implemented, or any feedback on how the work has been conducted, or the results of that work can really, even though it can sound, from the person giving the feedback, it can be positive, or it can just be really nice but constructive feedback. For an individual with criticism sensitivity, it can feel really negative, and it can feel quite debilitating, and it can really impact the next iteration of that, and that worry and that anxiety that can be there. So if it is with regards to an ADHD diagnosis, I'd look into rejection sensitivity, also possibly from an autistic perspective as well. It's really relevant, and just being, there's certain things that you can put in place for it, but also just starting that conversation and being aware of it is a great first step, and having some of those conversations around it. Another thing around fear of failure and giving up on revision, thinking about the process of learning and the journey, and not just the kind of end result. So if you're climbing up a mountain, for example, if you really take that to its extreme, so if you're climbing Everest, just being stood up there for 5 seconds is not probably worth all of those years of training and the exertion from the base camp all the way up. And so it's about trying to look at particular examinations and revision, about that kind of journey process. If you don't enjoy that, that's going to be a real hard slog. It's trying to make that process as inspiring and enjoyable as possible. Again, easier said than done. Can really help to not give up on that process, to know that actually it's not the end result that really matters. It's the kind of the journey as well is just as important. Can the assistive technology software, so the reading questions be permitted in GCSE examinations? Yeah, separate room. It depends on the exam board. So you could have a reader, or you can, in certain situations, have the AT software to read that aloud, and it just depends on the school and the exam board. But it's definitely something that you should ask the support team at the school. Yeah, can can we recommend any resources for an autistic student interpreting and understanding command words? I won't be able to. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head, but that's definitely something that we could send out. So I will get that logged, because it is really really important, as you say. Like, it can feel really disheartened when they're not getting it right. But yeah, that's definitely something that we can send out in terms of interpreting and understanding command words. And I think, just to touch on that as well, that I think one of the kind of key difficulties with in examinations and environments around what I touched on with reading, working memory, and processing speed, if you don't process either a command word, or if you don't process our word, so like do not talk about, or do talk about, or whatever it might, if you miss something because of your weak working memory or processing speed, that can change the whole context of the question. And so being able to a study skills tutor definitely would sit down to ensure that the student is able to kind of put some of those processes in place for themselves, to make sure that they're able to reread a key question in an examination. So if you're reading something really quickly, or under time pressure, you're feeling anxious anyway, that accuracy in reading is really important. And some of it will just have to be hard, like revised processes. I think that's most of the question. Really apologies if I've not answered anything. But as I say, if you want, we'll try and get back to those questions. If you wanted to email me anything, my email address is matthew@aimforward.co.uk. But if you drop an email to the team there, then you can then that will come through to me. But yeah, just to finish, just to say thank you so much to give up your evening to do this. It's really appreciated. If there's anything else that we can do, let us know. But yeah, just to kind of reiterate that kind of thank you so much for attending, and the obviously the care and the support that you want to give to your child or teen in terms of supporting them in this process. And it is stressful, and it will be hard, but hopefully trying to find those wins and create that positivity in that process. If hopefully some of the things that we've talked about today is spark some thoughts, and hopefully you'll find that useful. But yeah, I will leave you to your evenings now, and yeah, just to say thank you so much for attending, and hopefully we'll have another next webinar. We'll see people again. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and thanks again. Thank you.